Up next here in my 2026 NFL Deep Dive series, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars coming in at number 22 in the power rankings. One of the teams last year, along with Carolina, who we already covered, that definitely overachieved. And maybe not overachieved, but definitely exceeded expectations. An incredibly quick turnaround from what we expected with head coach Liam Coen coming in. His cringy introduction, but man, did he really make it work. And we'll get to why I'm so high on Liam Coen coming into this next season here with Jacksonville. His job was to get Trevor Lawrence ready, and Trevor Lawrence definitely was trending upwards, definitely looked good in a lot of games. I think there was some issues with the chemistry with Brian Thomas Jr. that didn't seem to carry over from BTJ's rookie season. We saw a little bit of Travis Hunter, but not nearly enough. And we'll see as we get to him and his role as a receiver, perhaps currently listed as a wide receiver 4 on this roster, and his role as a corner where they say he's going to be featured as a full-time starter. So it's going to be a defense with a little bit of offense a la Deion Sanders from those mid-90s Cowboys teams. So we'll talk into how we feel we're going to use him in this upcoming season and how he can make a real impact on this team. On the defensive side of the ball, they just extended Travon Walker, who, I mean, we'll get to what my thoughts are on that. And I think he's an incredibly overrated player. Definitely not number 1 overall pick, living up to that mantle. But a good enough early downs edge player, I guess, to be worthy of the extension he got in a couple years. It'll probably be like the 20th best contract for an edge player anyway. So good on him. But Josh Hines-Allen doing a lot of the heavy lifting for that defensive pass rush. They lost Devin Lloyd, which is going to come across maybe as a significant loss. We'll get to that as well. I kind of have mixed emotions about their secondary also. Same thing with the offensive line. The wide receiver room, huge anomaly. We'll get to that. The running back room, trust me, we're getting to it. Trust me, we're getting to it. And I am none too pleased with what the hell they were doing and what the hell they've done as of the recording of this video. Maybe they will sign someone else by the time. We'll get to that, but we always start with the coaching staff, which is the real, true high point of this team. Liam Coen leads actually a really nice coaching staff here. A tier 2 offensive coaching, tier 2 defensive coaching. He himself comes in as my 12th ranked head coach. I thought what he did last year, like the overachieving that Jacksonville was able to produce, it was just really great to see for a first-time head coach who had a little cringy start like we talked about, and to get these 2 coordinators to put in great performances as well. They really coached a hell of a season for the most part. You get Grant Udinsky, and this offense, they're coming in. It's going to be this modern West Coast / pro style, that little hybrid that's been going around the league a lot lately in the last couple of seasons, last decade or so. There's going to be a lot of heavy pre-snap motion, to create leverage and to just make the defense have to show their hand to make the job easier for the quarterback, make the job easier for the offensive line. They're going to run some condensed formations. This is going to allow them to do route combinations to create chaos for the defense, to have the defense have to do a lot of switching and have to be very precise in how they pass off certain routes, how they switch off in man coverage, how they pass off in zones when you run those condensed formations in those condensed areas. And you also got some of the smaller guys out there, like a Parker Washington, who's going to sneak around, sneak underneath some linebackers and whatnot, get open that way. But then you have, a guy like Jacoby Myers, a little bit of a bigger player, but a bigger slot type player, really thrives in the slot. So it allows you to create mismatch situations there where now he can line up really tight on the inside, but still be an outside receiver. And that allows you to use him in a really unique way. Then you got Brian Thomas Jr., who the chemistry was really low. Not the most physical player. I think that's maybe why he saw a little bit more struggling than in his rookie season. And then you got Brenton Strange, who's a bigger body tight end. That's some matchup issues for sure for the defense as well. What we're going to see also, they're going to want to have a physical inside running game with zone blocking techniques. Not a big fan of their running back room, though. I thought that They did not do a very good job of addressing the running back situation, letting Travis Etienne go to the New Orleans Saints. I thought he was a really good back. He performed really well in this offense. And then when they didn't bring in like a Rashad White, for example, someone at least familiar with this offense, from his time with Liam Coen in Tampa, I thought that was a great disservice to what this running game could be. And it's a huge reason why the offense in general kind of comes across as incredibly one-dimensional. And it puts a lot of the pressure on the passing game to execute really in like a top 8 level in order to excuse the just lack of ability that the running back room seemingly has right now. A lot of unproven pieces that we'll get to. But they do have a very diverse personnel group. Like we talked about, Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, Brenton Strange, even Travis Hunter in there. Bashul Tutin and and Chris Rodriguez, who they brought in. Like, these guys, they're all very different types of players, and it allows them to be a little bit more creative on the offense. Liam Coen likes to have very detail-oriented game plans and schemes, so having that diversity allows him to use diverse formations, allows him to diversify who he's got on the field and when, and it will drive defenses crazy, because when you have guys who are capable of doing multiple different things in multiple different situations, and you have some depth, as I'll call it some depth, in order to run a different type of game plan throughout a game even, that opens up huge opportunities for offensive success. And Liam Coen really thrives on that. So, and Grant Udinski does a great job of integrating into that offense as well. I think that a really successful offensive season for this team puts Grant Udinski right in the crosshairs for a head coaching opportunity next year. And I think the same can be said for the defensive side of the ball with Anthony Campanelli, who was the Green Bay Packers, part of the Green Bay Packers staff just a few seasons ago. He's bringing in a 4-3 hybrid defense that we saw last season. A lot of pre-snap shell into post-snap single high. So it is like this disguising that you'll see him do on the back end with the safeties and with the diamond nickel backers. And he likes to mix in man and zone concepts. There's not a whole lot of, it allows him, again, it comes from Liam Coen's leadership, I believe, what you saw with the offense, being able to diversify. That opens up Campanelli to diversify as well. And he really has a heavy use of dime package. He really wants to use that dime package a lot. Play fast and physical on the defense side of the ball. That's why you have a guy like Josh Hines-Allen, even an Eric Armstead who plays inside, but fits perfectly because he's got that athletic profile even as he's towards the end of his career. And it's why you trade for Ruka Horo, for example, and have Mason Smith sent out of town to Atlanta. You create a more athletic profile for your team. Losing Devin Lloyd, I think, was a big hit for them, because they do love to have that linebacker versatility. But Foyesade Oluokun really does fit the mold well. He's a converted safety early on in his career, converted to linebacker when he was in Atlanta, and then came here and really continued that really solid linebacker play. So his ability to play linebacker, but also stick in coverage, be a dime linebacker while maintaining a traditional linebacker stance, helps enhance the run game when you're trying to play a little bit smaller as well. So that really fits with what Campanelli likes. And then the DB versatility, Jerrion Jones and Monteric Brown and Jordan Lewis. You got some really good pieces there for them that we'll get to eventually in the secondary. That really helps Campanelli execute the exact type of defense that he's looking to put together from week to week. But for this coaching staff, it's all about the way that they roster build, I would say. And because they've proven, I think, last year that they really have the ability to outcoach a lot of the teams in the league. They were very well prepared every single week. They had very creative offense and defensive production. And I think there was players that had previously been seen as top level guys that, didn't exactly perform, didn't really build the chemistry. But then there was guys who emerged, Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington, I think come to mind immediately there. But across this coaching staff, they didn't have a first round pick this year because they decided that in their first year altogether, they were going to invest highly in Travis Hunter, who is a two-way football player. Probably the only actual two-way football player that there is right now. There hasn't been a legit one in forever. We've seen sprinkles of it with Mike Vrabel back in the day. Like, he was probably the closest one who got actually significant time, if that was even a thing. Haloti Ngata got some fullback play for a while there, but that was mostly used as just kind of like fun sub packages. Travis Hunter is legit. And so between these coaches here, the head coach Liam Coen and the two coordinators, how are you going to roll out the guy that has basically been 2 years in a row your first round pick in the NFL draft? You need to figure out how to get him on the field. He needs to be healthy. Number one, we'll get to all the things about Travis Hunter when we get to the player evals, but that is a very significant piece to the puzzle of this coaching staff's success this upcoming season. Is you need to get Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball being a significant contributor without really sacrificing the overall performance of the offense or the defense, which is going to be incredibly difficult. It's going to be incredibly difficult to get him engaged in all these meetings. It's going to be incredibly difficult to really overload him. And you have to find the balance here on the offense and defense side of the ball. You got to figure out where he really is best used. Now, this staff, Liam Coen, I would say, obviously he's the one that delivers the veto vote or whatever you want to call it. It seems that they've decided Travis Hunter is going to be the number one corner on this team while being a sub-package wide receiver, which that's a huge sacrifice for an offensive coach like Liam Coen. I wonder how that's going to adjust throughout the year, though, because if the defense, for the most part, for all intents and purposes, is playing pretty well, and the offense is having some struggles in the passing game, I would 100% not doubt seeing Travis Hunter end up switching that role and becoming more of a full-time wide receiver. I think that Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas Jr. and Brenton Strange, all of them being, solidified, I think, in this offense for Coen. I think that makes him a little bit more comfortable doing that. But at the end of the day, he was the second overall pick in the draft, and you gave up this year's first round pick in order to do it, not to count all the day 2 picks and day 3 picks that were given up in that trade package as well with Cleveland. So that's the overall arching here. But this staff really did a great job last year establishing themselves as one of the top staffs. So how they follow up is going to be the real test here. Don't be the 1-year wonder, young, fiery coaching staff, because we've seen Jacksonville do this before as an organization, most recently with Doug Peterson. So we'll see how this all works out, but it's looking up. It's looking like it's a really good staff to have. I appreciate you guys watching this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up on this video. Both of them help with the algorithm. Subscribe helps me just in general. Thumbs up helps push this video out to other people. Even if you disagree with what I'm saying, thumbs up the video. Now we're going to get to the offensive players, to the offensive position group, starting with the quarterback. So it's quarterback Trevor Lawrence coming into yet another season here, and I've got him as my 14th to 15th ranked quarterback. He's right smack dab in the middle for me, but he is definitely somebody who I feel it's looking up for him, for sure. He's got it was his first year with the head coach. He keeps changing offenses. It's really been an unfair start to his career. But last year, I thought he did incredibly well in a lot of situations. And as you'll see here, I got a little bit more detail for everybody as to how many of this particular position qualified for the ranking. So give you a little bit more of an idea here. Of the 25 eligible quarterbacks, he was third against pressure. He was ninth against the blitz. He was fourth when they didn't blitz at all. And he was 11th when he was kept clean. So these are really solid. That's top 10 performances right there from Trevor Lawrence. He was 8th in pressure faults out of 24 qualifying quarterbacks. So when he was getting pressured, it really just wasn't his fault all that often. He did a great job of making sure the ball got out on time and understood what the play call was. Now, he was middle of the pack in play action, which I don't know how much that's going to actually improve, because in order to have an effective play action game, really, you have to have the running game established in order for that to even work at all. And I've got a feeling that I think early in the year, we're going to see a lot of light boxes because Bashul Tutin and Chris Rodriguez are going to have to prove themselves. So they're going to have a lot of four-man rushes that they're going to be facing, I think, early in the year. Maybe a lot smaller formations, more nickel and dime. So how they counteract that, if they can't establish the run game, then it's going to be, play action is really going to be off the table altogether. He was 12th of 36 quarterbacks in terms of deep ball, 9th in big time throw percentage. He was 15th in the intermediate areas, and he was 4th in the short areas. So he, again, executing incredibly well down the field, making the right decisions. He was 16th in turnover-worthy plays. But when you're pushing the ball down the field, 9th in big-time throws, you're going to have opportunities where you put the ball in harm's way a little bit. The adjusted completion percentage, 19th of the 26 qualifying quarterbacks. So not a lot of incompletions were on the receivers. A lot of it was just on him and ball placement at times and putting the ball into traffic and all that. So the turnover-worthy plays and the adjusted completion percentage sort of meld together into one stat, into one perspective. And so for him to come, 14th-ish, 15th-ish to start the season, it does come from the idea that Trevor Lawrence has had an up and down career so far. We've seen him have great seasons and then come back and then just kind of be like mediocre, and then he'll have great games and he'll be mediocre again. He'll carry the team on his back and then be a complete and utter detriment to the team. And it all really depends on how well him and Liam Coen come out of this season, how well they come out of this offseason together with the chemistry, and how well he gets on the same page with his weapons for what they're adding to this team, because they got to come back with some new concepts. Can't just run it all back the exact same way. Defenses will just eat you up. And also how well the running game helps him, how well the offensive line helps him. There's a lot of factors here for Trevor Lawrence that are going to determine whether or not he's going to be able to actually finally get into that true top 10 quarterback ranking. And in terms of backups, you got Nick Mullins, you got Carter Bradley. Not a whole lot to really hang your hat on in terms of backups here. Mullins is a good veteran to have, a good little voice in the locker room. But it's all put onto Trevor Lawrence here. And Liam Coen very easily could have just given up on Trevor Lawrence. He would have been the third. I think he's the third head coach Lawrence has had since coming to the NFL. And, he took that job understanding that Trevor Lawrence was his guy. And to get him into that area where I do feel like Trevor Lawrence has a high floor at this point. I'm just not so sure how much higher the ceiling is than his floor. And I think this season is going to be a huge determining factor for that, because though Brian Thomas Jr. didn't have the greatest season and everything, there is a lot of running it back with the teammates that he has. So, they didn't really throw a whole lot of new starters at all into this group. It's when we get to the weapons and all that, it's very much the same. So it's about building. You created the foundation this past season. Now it's about building up the players around you and making the guys better. Actually taking Brian Thomas Jr., making him better, actually taking Parker Washington, getting him to repeat what he did last year, which was such a great performance, and having a really strong passing game, making smart decisions to assist the running game, which is going to be, perhaps a little lackluster. So there's a lot on Trevor Lawrence now to actually step up and to enter that upper echelon of top quarterbacks. So much like I said, Trevor Lawrence has like this high floor, not really quite how high the ceiling is. I'd say the same is true for his weapons group here. They come in 22nd to 27th. Travis Hunter, we talked about him a little bit. To me, he could inevitably be the best receiver on the team. I think that is not completely out of the question. I would love to actually see him more on offense than on defense. Putting that aside, they got Brian Thomas Jr., who after an amazing rookie season came back with just bad to mediocre at best play from week to week. He had 88 targets, only caught 48 of them. He was 91st of 97 receivers in terms of drops percentage. So we talked about, the adjusted completion percentage for Trevor Lawrence not really showing that drops are a huge issue. All the drop issues seem to be falling on Brian Thomas. He just wasn't the same guy in the second year. Don't really know what quite went wrong. It's just, his role in an offense is pretty straightforward. And I don't know if they were trying to use him maybe in a way that he was uncomfortable, or the terminology was a little off, or he was just legitimately facing top-level corners now coming off that rookie season, and he just can't handle it. It's something like that. He was 84th of 97 in contested catch percentage, so he wasn't going up and contesting the ball really well. He had 707 yards, 170 yards after the catch, which is fine. He's mostly a deep threat. Anyway, not a lot of yards after the catch there. 2 touchdowns. But of 40 qualifying receivers, he was 33rd with the deep ball. Of 33 qualifying receivers, 20th in the intermediate areas. That's 10 to 19 yards. And under 10 yards, he was 71st of 81 qualifying receivers. So it just wasn't this great year. He was 32nd against man, 52nd against zone. He was 40th when he lined up in the slot for a quarter of his snaps out of 70 qualifying receivers. It was just not a good year. It was the tale of two wide receivers. Now, he comes in at an 84 because I don't want to completely punish him for what was a bad season when he had such a great rookie season. So I feel like I kind of met him in the middle here, where, okay, you take his best season his rookie year, take this horrible season in his sophomore year, and let's meet in the middle. And this is probably who he's going to be now, is this guy in the middle. He'll balance it all out, and this is who he's going to be, which is like a low-end number one. And I think that's fine, as long as you can match it with the depth of the rest of the offense. And, you counter that with, you got Jacoby Myers, who he brought over from the Raiders, who, bigger slot guy, performs at his best in the slot. Even though the Raiders wanted to make him an outside wide receiver, and to a large degree, Jacksonville wants to use him as an outside receiver. I think his best usage is just as that big slot guy. But then you had Parker Washington emerge last year as a really great player. And he took 50% of his snaps from the slot, about 50 from out wide. But he was the 7th best out of 70 receivers in the slot last year. So the slot was really where he was going to execute. And he brought a rare physicality for a guy his size to the position. He was 14th in contested catch percentage. He was targeted 88 times, 58 catches, 847 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was the 11th against man, 19th against zone. And under 19 yards, he was 17th in the league. In the short and intermediate areas, came in 17th in both. So he just executed, I think, incredibly well in these scenarios. And he was somebody who I think when he came into the league, people sort of saw him as just like a role player, like a smaller slot role player, maybe a gadget type guy. And I think last year, Liam Coen really found a great role for him. And, sort of going back into, okay, who are some past teams that Liam Coen has worked? You go to Tampa Bay and you look at a guy like Chris Godwin and you go, okay, maybe Jacoby Myers is a bit more of that Chris Godwin profile, like a bigger guy who can be a slot guy. But Parker Washington kind of just did that role this whole last season. And I think that if you double down on that this upcoming year, you could get one of the sneakier, good wide receiver 2 performances out of Parker Washington. And he could be a great guy that you can use in a lot of different ways. I'd like to see him a little bit more in the screen game. He didn't get a whole lot going behind the line of scrimmage, but I'd love to see him in the screen game and see how that works out. Maybe you work in some RPOs perhaps and have him be like, in that swing bubble screen type role for that. Get him out in space and see how he executes. I think adding that little wrinkle to his game could help this offense significantly. We touched on Travis Hunter and then some of the wide receivers they brought in. I mean, they weren't afraid to go and get some rookies, CJ Williams and Josh Cameron, some solid additions to, throwing some depth at the wall there, especially if Travis Hunter is only going to be used sparingly in sub packages. You need guys who can maybe be more regular out there in case, you get some injuries, some underperformances, some, breaks in there, and throwing a couple assets at some day 3 guys like that, I think is a pretty solid move. Bashul Tutin and Chris Rodriguez, I think they're a complete 50-50 split for me this season in terms of every snap, whether it's running or receiving. So we'll get to that. I don't see them as being all that different in terms of players. Bashul Tutin is maybe a little slightly better in the receiving game, and so therefore a slightly better overall back. But then what they did with the tight ends, I mean, they extended Brenton Strange. They drafted Tanner Koziel and Nate Borkircher in the second round. And to me, he wasn't even the best tight end they drafted. I got Tanner Koziel graded a little bit better. But you see all the R brackets in there. That's a lot of commitment to getting younger in the weapons room, getting some depth in there as well, and just trying to find some sort of diamond in the rough breakout star in that way, which I'm not completely against that. And you got Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange graded out great for me. An 83 grade. I think that he is a solid tight end. I think he had a great performance last year. I think he earned the contract that he got. Plays an actual traditional tight end role really well. All situations. Can play the inline role. And I think that works really well with what they want to do everywhere else, the condensing of the formations. Even with, I understand, kind of reading over what they wanted to do, it kind of made the tight end situation make a little more sense to me. Because you want to have guys out there that are bigger, that create these matchup issues that you can play tight with and run the ball inside and, have a play action game where you can get these guys out in space and they'll have the contested catch advantage. I get that. So there is something to that, but it is lacking because Travis Hunter is not going to be positioned as an actual wide receiver full time. I would say that this is what holds back inevitably the weapons group from being like a top half of the league weapons group. Now the running back room is just, to me, it's a disaster. Bashul Tutin and Chris Rodriguez both come in as a 72 grade, which is like what, running back 3, low end running back 2, running back 3 grades, 32nd in the league, dead last. And it's dead last by a significant margin. It's this most significant margin between 31 and 32 that I have for any position group. It's just really, really bad. I understand Chris Rodriguez leaving Washington, because Washington, he would have been running back 5 in that group. We already covered them. You can go back and look. He would have been RB5 and ended up cut anyway. It's just really disappointing that they didn't add to this group. I know they wanted to add J.K. Dobbins. I mean, they still might. Maybe after I release this in a couple weeks during training camp in the preseason, they'll add another running back. But there's just nothing here. there's just really nothing here. You have Bashul too, and he had 82 carries last year. He averaged 3.7 yards a carry. 5 touchdowns. He had a fumble. He had 1 explosive run, forced 18 missed tackles. It just a very below average season for any type of running back at all. Not a whole lot to write home about. The sample size, it was kind of like, yeah, he was a running back who should have been maybe drafted in the 5th or 6th round, and that's what a 5th or 6th round, true 5th, 6th round performing running back is going to give you. Then you look at Chris Rodriguez, and it was kind of more of the same. He had a different type of offense last season. He had more gap runs than zone runs. He had 4.5 yards a carry at 500 yards for the season, 6 touchdowns. So he kind of got thrown out there, with that Ja'Cory Kroski-Merrick group and whatnot, and a team that was really struggling to find a running identity when Jaden Daniels got hurt. But it was kind of like, yeah, these kind of force-fed him a little bit. He had some good opportunities and whatnot, but now coming in, the expectation is that he's supposed to be like a number 1 running back. He's never been at any point in his career anything other than a running back 3, running back 4, special teams guy. And I know people were high on him when he came out as a rookie, but it just hasn't solidified. He's been in the league. I think this is like his 5th year in the league now. Nothing's really solidified. Nothing's really held for him. So it does give me a little pause to be like, okay, what are we getting out of Chris Rodriguez at all here? And what are we getting out of Bashul Tutin? I can get on board with like a true running back competition or like a true running back by committee strategy. I can, but at some point, you got to have a guy who's got some type of upside to him. And I never really saw it in Bashul Tutin. Chris Rodriguez, any kind of upside that he had kind of disappeared throughout his NFL career so far. So how are they going to find and execute a true effective running game here? It's such an anomaly of what they could potentially have to do here, where they're going to start passing the ball so much that maybe you pass the ball so much that teams start to just completely back off. But I feel like teams are going to be inviting this run game. So between these two guys, maybe LaKent Allen sneaks in and he's a breakout guy. Amir Abdullah has been in the league forever. He's just there to return kicks at this point. If he even stays on the team, if he's even on the team by the time this video is released. So you're going true running back by committee. You're going true 50-50 split, I would think. And you're just hoping that one of these guys breaks out and you have like a top 25 run game. And you just ride the pass and ride the pass and ride the pass and hope that it's enough and make the passing game an extension of the run game. I guess you can go back to some of the receivers that are there, like Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, and all that, make them an extension of the run game with a quick passing game, a screen game, an RPO game. It's just, this is such a wild card, and this is something that just unnecessarily drags down the overall perception of what this team in this offense should be. Now moving over to the offensive line, and it's an offensive line that's kind of just middling for me right now. I think there's potential for it to get into the upper half of the league if they play certain other players that I like better than the ones that are starting right now. But I think there's a true competition at left tackle between Walker Little and Cole Van Lanen. I like Walker Little more. I just like Walker Little more, but Cole Van Lanen last year actually did pretty decent. 352 pass snaps. Was 14th in pressures, only gave up a sack, 14th in hurries of 62 qualifying tackles. So not even all 32 starting tackles were qualified, and he was doing pretty damn well. In the run game, he was 24th in zone, 19th in gap. He was 11th in penalties, so he wasn't taking a whole lot of penalties either. Sort of like played like a low-end starter. to a large degree, gave up 33rd in quarterback hits given up. So with more snaps, he probably would have been a little bit towards like 25th to 30th in pressures and hurries, and hits probably would have been closer to 40th if he had played, 25% more snaps like most of starting tackles did last year. But for what he was asked to do, he actually did a pretty good job. So you can't hate on the guy all that much. It's just interesting to see like him and Walker Little competing with each other when you would think Walker Little would have the inside thing, even though he's not significantly better than what Cole Van Lanen did last year. Then you sort of move on to the inside, and you got Ezra Cleveland, who's probably their best overall offensive lineman, with Robert Hainsey at center. Robert Hainsey, great run blocker, not going to give you a whole lot in the pass blocking game. Then you got Patrick McCarry, who is sort of your Swiss Army knife offensive lineman, can play guard, can play tackle. He's like a 5-tool offensive lineman. But they drafted by number 1 interior offensive lineman in this last draft class, Emmanuel Pregnon, who I would say you plug and play him over McCarry. Have McCarry be sort of your 6th offensive lineman, have him be just swing offensive lineman here. And I think that would raise up this offensive line significantly. It would really help with the run game, probably get them into the top, 15, top 12. And in pass protection, get them into that top 20. I just really liked Emmanuel Pregon's game. And I love that they drafted him. And I kind of like the running back room. I hope that there is sort of this clear competition between certain people. Cole Van Lanen and Walker Little, and then Pregnon and McCarry. And then you got Anton Harrison, who had a bit of a down year last year. I thought he was really looking up after the season before, and just really struggled to find his footing in this last season. Sort of the same idea that you had with Brian Thomas Jr. It was this like weird regression. He wasn't a liability. He only gave up a sack. Like, he wasn't a liability by any means. But he did give up a lot of pressures. He did give up a lot of hurries. He was, a bottom end starter in the run game, and that reflects in his grade there. Middle of the pack in penalties, was a little grabby at times. But it didn't feel comfortable for him out there. It's sort of like there was that regression. And I do wonder if he can now bounce back this year, gets a little more comfortable in this offense, with some of the calls. People don't realize that the offensive line has their own individual calls, their own individual terminology, sliding to the left, sliding to the right, passing off certain guys. And as he gets more comfortable with that in this style of offense, I think we'll see him get back to what he was in production-wise. He did take double the amount of snaps, though, as Cole Van Lanen. So him giving up more pressures and more hurries is almost really expected at that point. So I'm not too concerned about Anton Harrison. I think he's still a good player, just coming off a year that wasn't so great on the stat line. You got Wyatt Milliam in there, who's another swing guy for me. He played tackle in college, guard here at the next level. He's sort of like a younger version of what you have in Patrick McCarry. Just slightly not as good by my estimation. Jonah Monheim is your backup center, really the only backup center you have. So probably Chuma Edoga is the one that's the odd one out for this offensive line in terms of who they're going to keep and bring into the next season. If they only bring in 9 offensive linemen, I think that they will probably only bring in 9, because you do have McCarry, you do have Wyatt Milliam, who are, tackle capable as well. And then so to have them with Walker Little and Emmanuel Pregnon and then Jonah Monheim as your backup center, I think that's the most ideal group to keep. Injuries aside and all that, but the competition here for the offensive line is certainly going to be something for Jaguar fans to keep an eye on. there's going to be some legit competition here at some key positions on this offense that are, I think, inevitably are going to be what decides the fate of what this offense is going to be throughout the season. So they are my 26th ranked offense. To no surprise, my 32nd ranked rush offense, which drags this group down, to that 26th spot, because they are my 18th passing offense with a tier 2 offensive coaching group. Really got to improve the run game. Really got to give me some confidence here in that run game. We'll watch as the preseason unfolds and who breaks out in that running game. But I think that it'll be potentially one of those seasons where they're going to be fishing for a running back, a veteran presence in there to just raise the floor of this group a little bit, because it is currently something that is going to be dragging them down quite a bit. Now let's go to the defensive side of the ball, where we're going to cover this front four first. This defensive line with the superstar Josh Hines-Allen, the overrated Travon Walker, and it's a defensive line that actually has real potential here, just not a lot of depth. So this defensive line, it comes in and it's not that bad. It's just lacking, right? Like, they got some good players out here. The depth that they contributed to this is just, I think, horrible. Absolutely horrible. I guess I'll just lead with that. They needed to add like a legit number 3 edge player to this group. Like a guy they can put out there in true pass rush situations. And they did not do that. They added Wesley Williams and Zach Durfee, who are like edge 4, edge 5 quality guys to come in. Maybe you get a breakout star out of one of them. They have BJ Green out there, who's sort of the middle between the both. Albert Regis doesn't add anything in the pass rush. He's all run defending. He's a direct backup to Devon Hamilton. So you're really rolling out your top 4 guys here. Hines-Allen, Eric Armstead, Ruka Horahoro, and Travon Walker. And we'll start with Josh Hines-Allen, who is legitimately one of the best edge players in the entire league. He didn't really have a whole lot of success sacks-wise last year, only had 9. But he was number 2 in overall pressures out of 60 eligible edge rushers. 6th in overall pass rush win percentage. 1st in hits, 2nd in hurries. So he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for this pass rush, just wasn't finishing it off. So he was doing all the cooking for everyone else to eat. Basically, he was 5th in batted balls. Even in the run game, he was good. 26th in stops percentage, 32nd in missed tackles. He was like middle of the pack of eligible guys in missed tackles, which is not bad at all. Not a bad place to be. Considering he's playing with his hair on fire so often. But this was really the season where he established himself, I think. And he made Travon Walker a lot of money. He's so quick off the edge. He plays with such great instincts. He can keep his eyes on the ball at all times. He doesn't get fooled by screen passes or draw plays or play action. He has a full understanding of the offensive lineman that he's facing when he goes up against him. He knows whether to use speed or power. He knows whether to use a combination of both. He knows whether to use a swim move or a spin move or a bull rush. He has such a great study on his opponents that it makes him just a complete nightmare, and it makes him the guy that you have to focus on. If you're an offensive coordinator, you have to you have to shift your blocking towards him. You have to leave your running back in as an extra protector, so you're naturally running less guys into coverage. He is a game-changing player on this team, and it's a team that really doesn't have a lot of those. You could argue he's the only one right now, the only true established one at least, as Trevor Lawrence continues to find his way. But he's just so damn good, man. Like, rarely loses a rep, as you see, 6th out of 60. And he gets so many opportunities, and for him to execute so often really speaks to the high praise that he should be getting as like a top top 3 to 5 pass rusher in the entire league. He's no Myles Garrett, but gets that 94 grade, and 84, that's starting caliber, top 10 run defender as well. He doesn't get a lot of credit for that because his pass rushing is so good. But just a tremendous player altogether. Didn't force any fumbles, which I thought was weird. A weird stat for him. Sort of just throwing that one out there. Just a weird stat for a guy like him to have. But his partner, Travon Walker, who just got paid a lot of money, who Jaguar fans online for some reason say that this guy is so legit. Oh, he's so great. He's one of the best one. He had multiple years of 10 plus sacks. Well, guess what? This was the year that the sacks finally reflected his overall production, because I'm going to go over some of these. You can roll his highlight reel over some of this, but out of 60 edge players, he was 41st in pressures, 45th in pass rush win percentage, 32nd in hits, 32nd in hurries. That's a number 2 edge guy at best, right there. 19th in batted balls. So as a pass rusher, he's a number 2. And he had 4 sacks. But if you go back to all the other seasons out there and you look at his pressure rate, you look at his pass rush win rate, you look at his hits and his hurries, it did not reflect a guy who was a double-digit sack guy. It just didn't. Because Travon Walker he's not that guy. What he is, he's a really good run defender. A really sure tackler. He was 7th in missed tackle percentage, which is phenomenal. 9th in stops percentage out of 127 qualifying edge players. That's phenomenal as well. He only played 521 snaps. I assume that number is going to go way up if he stays healthy enough. But he was a guy that was drafted, and you were like, he's coming out a year early to be a project. But the ceiling is so high, and he just kind of just stayed the same type of player that he was when he came out, which was a guy who was going to be a solid early down edge player, set a strong edge, play with some really good power, create some matchup issues. But as an overall pass rusher, it was just kind of And that's really what he is. He's just And you can sit there, you can call me a hater all you want. I don't mind. Call me a hater. I am king hater of Travon Walker, but I have all the things here that just back up what I'm saying. And it's a whole career so far of the same. So now that he's finally getting the sack production that reflects what he's done, what he's actually produced on the field as a pass rusher, now maybe you can actually be a little bit more honest about what he needs to develop, and he can go about that this offseason and eventually develop into like that true like number 2 edge guy where you're not overly disappointed at the fact that they didn't add anyone to the edge room of any real consequence. It's okay. I'll be a hater. And then you work over to Eric Armstead, the veteran of the room, who's got great inside-out abilities. If you want to play big, he can play on the edge. If you want to play fast, he plays the B gap. But he's got like that traditional 3-4 defensive end. That's really what he's been throughout most of his career, going back to being in San Francisco. But still producing quite well, at least as a pass rusher and even in run defense to a large degree. Didn't have a great stops percentage at all, but this guy's facing double teams. He's the one in the interior that's forcing the ball to other people. That's really what his role is in the run game. So he wins in the run game more often than not. He's just not getting the tackles and the production to really back that up. In the pass rush, he got six sacks last year. That was 11th best out of interior defensive linemen. 13th in pressures, 28th in win percentage, 43rd in hits, 4th in hurries. So his pressures and his hurry rate was good. Win rate was kind of smack dab in the middle of the eligible guys. But he is aging. So, every year he's probably going to get a little bit worse. Unless he has this Cameron Hayward like breakout year, re-breakout year. Can't I say it's a breakout year because he's broken out in his career already as one of the best interior linemen of the generation, really. One of the most versatile, at least. I mean, him and DeForest Buckner on those 49ers teams were amazing. even his time here in Jacksonville, he's been great since coming over, but yeah, I figure he's on the downswing here. But still really good. He was 5th in forced fumbles, so he was at least attacking the football really effectively. And that comes with forcing the ball carriers into other areas, taking advantage of quarterbacks stepping up into the pocket, having quick hands, understanding where the ball placement's going to be at a certain time that you can only really get with a great veteran player. And they brought in Ruka Horo as sort of just this lateral player swap move to be, I guess, the heir apparent to what they have with Eric Armstead. We'll see how Horo develops. He's kind of overdrafted a bit there, and we'll see what this inevitably turns into for him. But it's 19th to 21st in pass rush, 19th to 20th in run defense. Josh Hines-Allen does a lot of the heavy lifting in both of those areas, but they got some good complementary ball on the inside and on the outside. Devon Hamilton's a good nose tackle, good run defending nose tackle still. They just lack so much depth. I would just love to see them add here some veteran presences in the offseason. I mean, Joey Bosa's right there. Why not add him? Raise the floor a little bit of this pass rush. He doesn't need to play a lot. Come on, add Joey Bosa. Now going to the linebackers, and last year one of the better linebacking groups, but you lost Devin Lloyd, and they didn't really replace him at all. They brought in Parker Hughes, the rookie, but they kind of are just riding with what they got, and what they got is Foyesade Oluokun, who is that undersized linebacker, but he understands the position really well at this point. He plays it really well. He's a really solid player. 103 tackles last year, 42 assisted tackles. His missed tackles percentage, he was 22nd out of 59 linebackers. Stops, he was 4th out of 58, 5th in forced fumbles out of 59 qualifying linebackers. So just pretty solid. Had 10 pressures, so not a huge blitz threat by any means. He was targeted 74 times, though, in the passing game, gave up 62 catches. That was 39th out of 52 linebackers. 518 yards allowed, but it was the 11th best passer rating allowed. So when he's giving up catches, about what is that? 7 yards a catch? Not bad at all. And that's running sideline to sideline, chasing down running backs who are running out into space. He was 22nd in man coverage, but he was 6th in zone coverage amongst the 52 linebackers. That's a really great number. I've spoken about it in other videos, and I'll keep speaking about it. Linebackers playing in zone coverage is the key. It's where they're going to be playing in the passing game more often than not, so that's where you want them to really be comfortable. If they're not great man coverage guys, that's not the biggest deal in the world, but he is able to do both so well with that safety background going back to college. He didn't give up any passing touchdowns, had an interception, had 6 pass breakups, so he had a pretty solid season. He's another guy who's played a lot of time in the league, and his size does affect him at times. It's not as significant as with other players, but it is an issue. It is an issue that can rear its head from time to time. When you get some of the more power backs and some of these tight ends and whatnot, that he's 30 pounds smaller than at times. But it does allow him to match up really well against slot receivers and guys, crossing routes and stick and mesh and all that. It allows him to work really well in that sense. And even when they're looking to play smaller in dime packages, it keeps him on the field, and he's one of the more effective dime players because of that. What he's got going on around him, though, is questionable at best. Right now, Ventrell Miller is listed as the next starter. He doesn't come in graded very high at all. We'll see if he can, as he gets starter minutes, can start to become more starter quality, I guess is the best way to put it. You got Jack Kaiser, who's another traditional linebacker coming into his second season. Actually liked him coming out. He came out of Notre Dame, right? Thinking of the right linebacker. In run defense, he can be a bit of an asset here, I think, as a rotational linebacker. Parker Hughes, kind of just, like I said. Dennis Gardeck, he's a linebacker, but he's kind of more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. He had most of his success as more of an edge player anyway during his time at Arizona. So we'll see what comes of Gardeck and his conversion to more of a traditional linebacker role, or if he's going to be somebody who's just going to be out there as a blitz threat more than anything else. I could see that happening as well, create some matchup issues, allow guys on your defensive front to, play a different role, kick inside a little bit more, create some more leverage in the pass rush. I think Gardeck could be a good contributor in that sense. But for what they do have, they're 13th to 14th in coverage and 19th to 22nd in run defense. With Oluokun doing the heavy lifting there, it's sort of the same story as what we talked about with Josh Hines Allen up front. It's a fine group as long as the best player in that group is on the field. When that player is not on the field, that's when you run into some significant issues. And this could be a disaster if Oluokun is out. It would easily be the worst linebacking group in the league. It would be right there with Cincinnati, for example, who are yet to cover. But it's a group that, again, needed something added to it. It was you lost a significant player to that group in Devin Lloyd. You needed to add something to it. You needed to add like a high floor veteran at the very least, and you didn't do that. And that's why this group is eerily similar to what they have in the running back room, where it was a group that needed addition after losing what they lost, and they didn't do it. So the team building aspect of it, the team building strategy behind this linebacking group is incredibly concerning. It's when you run an incredibly undersized group like they're going to be running as well, it's a huge risk, I will say. And it puts a lot of pressure on particularly your interior defensive line, what you got going on between the hashes in run defense. And it's already like barely a top 20 run defending linebacking group anyway. So you're putting a lot of pressure on Devon Hamilton, on Albert Regis, who's going to be having to come in if you're going to play really big in some of these situations. And then in obvious passing situations, maybe you get a little bit smaller and it works out that way. But in these running situations, I think teams are going to be able to take advantage here. Run their tier 3 pack guys, except for Jerry and Jones, who comes in. He's an A. I mean, he has the Saquon Barkley clip working against him. But other than that, the guy was actually really good at closing out tackles and getting in the right position and et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of depth. Very good depth. They got 4 legit can start cornerbacks, 2 good safeties. The Jalen Husky pick I thought was reckless. I thought they could have used a better depth safety. But Eric Murray, and we'll get to Antonio Johnson shortly, but this is about Travis Hunter, who didn't do enough last year to really qualify for any rankings. 157 snaps at corner, 151 on the outside. Gave up 96 yards on 9 receptions. Had 2 pass breakups. It was a good year, but the injury and stretching himself thin on both sides of the ball does really affect the grade for Travis Hunter. Because, I mean, as a man cover corner, as a zone cover corner, the guy's just really, really good. He's one of the best corner prospects that have come out in a long time, which says a lot about his ability as just an athlete to be able to play on both sides of the ball the way that he did at Colorado and be like wide receiver 1 and corner 1 in the same draft class. Jacksonville's choosing to use him here as a cornerback 1. I get the value of having a guy that you feel's a lockdown corner. Just put him on one side of the ball, shut down that side of the field, and then let the defense sort of roll to the other side. He's very capable of doing that. My problem with Travis Hunter is the commitment if he can't fully commit to being a corner, then he can only get so high in terms of what his development is, because he's still got a lot of room to develop here. He's only a 79 grade coming in, which is still a good grade, but you want to see him as a second-year player get into that high 80s, like into that, you want to see him get to that level that we talk about with, Christian Gonzalez and Patrick Surtain and Sauce Gardner and, Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter and guys like that, who are like these top level, legit top level corners. He can match up against anybody. I do wonder if he's out there playing on offense, he inevitably has to come off the field on defense, so that does affect his overall impact ability for this defense in this role. And simultaneously, does it affect his weekly preparation? Because how many meetings can a guy go into? How much studying can he do? It's hard enough to do it at one position and be truly great at that position long term. So that's my main concerns about Travis Hunter when it comes to that. But I still think he's a great player, and I think he's still going to do really great things. Playing opposite of him is going to be Montaric Brown, who is quietly one of the better starting corners in the league. Very quietly, like he's not like some top level guy, but definitely starting caliber, and I don't think he gets enough talk here. Very, very reliable. Not the best against the top level wide receivers in the league, but if you got to match him up against the average wide receiver 2 in the NFL, I think you're going to come out ahead more times than not. Jordan Lewis is their nickel, their slot. And last year he had a pretty interesting run of it all. 117 snaps on the outside, 392 in the slot. He was the 6th graded slot corner out of 36 eligible slot corners. So it is a very good performance. 55th with man coverage, 28th in zone coverage. He was 58th in completion percentage allowed. He only gave up 310 yards on 41 receptions. So that's a guy who keeps everything in front of him. He does a great job of being sticky on the wide receiver, and despite giving up a high completion percentage, that receiver was down almost immediately. Not a lot of yak being given up by Jordan Lewis. Gave up 5 touchdowns, which you'd like to see that improve. He also took 9 penalties. So, you want to see that number come down a little bit. But when you're playing in the slot and you kind of have the outside established in the new NFL where there's a lot of, the quick passing game and all that, his size will come into play a little bit, and he can, against bigger slot guys, he will lose those battles more often than not. But again, sort of just like what you get with Montaric Brown, Jordan Lewis against the average slot corner in the NFL is going to be the one that comes out ahead. That's why he was the 6th ranked slot corner. He wasn't the number 1 corner in the slot because of, size disparities and physicality issues and all that. He's really suffered in the run game quite a bit also. And that goes back to the physicality that he's just seemingly lacking at this point. I kind of like the idea of Jordan Lewis situationally getting matched up on the outside. I think you get some of the smaller receivers that end up playing on the outside a little bit, like a Zay Flowers, for example. I don't hate the idea of him being matched up in those situations on the outside. It's just when you get into those contested catch situations with Jordan Lewis, that's where he's at a huge disadvantage. So you'd like to see him get out of those scenarios more often than not. And the best way to do that is you put him in the slot, have him play a little. I would almost like him to play off the ball a little bit, let him play with some more instincts, let him play with some more vision. Jerry and Jones sort of the same idea. I think he's on the come up here as Jordan Lewis is aging out. I think from a physicality standpoint, he's just a better prospect. Then you got Eric Murray and Antonio Johnson, who are kind of one and the same, but Antonio Johnson is coming off of one of the better safety seasons in the league last year. He was 4th in touchdowns allowed with only 1. He was 2nd with 5 interceptions. He was 3rd in passer rating allowed, 3rd lowest passer rating allowed. Played mostly in that true free safety role, came up into the box about 200 times, played in the slot 91 times. Gave up 21 catches, 192 yards. It's a bit of a higher percentage, but he's also, a lot of his coverage came from when he did play in those box and slot snaps. Playing the sort of like a too high shell helped out in keeping him sort of out of the line of fire for the most part. But his ability to break up passes the way that he did, he had 3 pass breakups. He was right in the middle of the pack of the safeties for forced incompletion percentage. I thought Antonio Johnson, this was the kind of guy he was when he came out of, was it Mississippi State or Texas A&M? I get their logos are very similar. Where people actually had a first round grade on him for a long time. And then he kind of didn't perform at that high level in his final year in college and slipped in the draft. But he was always going to be this type of player, this starting caliber safety who you can put in the box, play some physicality, let him match up in some man coverage from time to time with some slot players and tight ends and whatnot. He can come up, play a physical game in the run game, be that 8th man in the box if you need him to, reliable, gap protection, gap discipline at that 2nd, 3rd level. So this is no surprise to me that he ended up being this. It was just a matter of him getting the opportunity to be on the field, and I think this defensive scheme that Campanelli runs also really suits him, which is why his first year under it, he has this breakout season. So I anticipate him growing a lot more. If he adds more physicality to his game, that would be an advantage, but I'd like to see him add more like sideline to sideline speed on the back end and more instincts in tracking the ball when it's in the air to be able to build off of what he did last season, because though he did have 5 interceptions, it was a lot of just, him being schemed into the right place at the right time, more so than him putting himself there. So I'd like to see when that ball gets in the air, down towards the numbers and everything, him instinctually know that that's sort of coming, and that comes with study, that comes with chemistry with his defensive coordinator and the corner on whatever side of the field he's on. And when he is playing in that center field role, I'd like to see him, again, get some more sideline to sideline speed, more anticipation, getting left to right and anticipating where the ball is going to go, understanding the scheme, understanding what the offense is trying to accomplish to better accomplish his goal of breaking up the passes, causing turnovers. So overall, it is a middle of the pack group, but I think that the floor is really high here because of the depth that they have. And I think that when you have Travis Hunter who can come off the field and you still have viable starting corners, that's a huge advantage for what they want to use Travis Hunter for. And I think that that can help raise the offense in turn and allow them to use him on offense a lot more because you have these options here with Brown, Lewis, Jones, and even Antonio Johnson who can come up and play in the slot. So overall, this is my 16th ranked defense, smack dab in the middle of the league. 18th pass defense, 25th run defense, but tier 2 coaching. The coaching is so good. The scheme just works for these players. And I think as we can see guys develop, some of the younger guys, the linebacking group, there's still that question mark there about who's the true linebacker 2. If they get some development in that sense, they can raise this defense up to closer to the top 10. Now going to the schedule, they have the 22nd easiest schedule, 22nd strength of schedule. So the 10th easiest schedule, 0.49. Vegas over-under is 8.5 wins. I have that as a bit of a push here. I got them 8 to 9 wins. They get Cleveland, they get Tennessee twice, Washington at home. Those are my guaranteed wins. The only losses I have them really getting at Denver versus New England versus Philadelphia and then at Baltimore. Those are really tough games. playing, these top 5, top 7 teams, 2 of them on the road. But after the bye week, other than that game against Baltimore, it's a very advantageous schedule. So they could be a team that gets off to a slower start because of that. Because, you get some really tough games in there, even at Cincinnati versus Houston before the bye week. But then after the bye week, you're facing Indianapolis at home, which is a bit of a push game. But then you're got the 2 games against Tennessee. You're at the Giants, which you wish you were at home. You're at Chicago, wish you were at home. You're at Dallas, but still right there. It's not the worst matchup in the world for you. So, theoretically, they could go on a hell of a run there after the bye week and really win the division off of that, because they could win, except the game against Baltimore, they could win every single one of those games after the bye week. And it's a rare moment in the schedule where it seems to be the tale of 2 halves. So, for me, the key to this team is get to the bye week at 500. You want to get to the bye week at 3-3. You don't want to drop the game against Cincinnati or Houston. You want to get there and then give yourself a chance here to go on a bit of a run when the schedule eases up the way that it does. So overall, they are my 22nd ranked team with 12th best head coach, 26th offense, and 16th defense. Again, room for growth. The running back room is a huge one. And the competitions on the offensive line, that can raise that offense. They figure those 2 things out. That can raise the offense into the top 20 easily. And then figuring out linebacker 2, figuring out what you got going on in terms of depth off the edge for your pass rush, and how you're going to use Travis Hunter will raise the defense and, frankly, also raise the offense up as well. And there it is, my number 22 team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Thank you guys for watching. Again, hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment in the comment section below about what you think of Jacksonville. Thumbs up the video as always. Even if you disagree, thumbs up the video. More people will see the video, and maybe more people will agree that you're right and I'm wrong. Maybe that's the case, but I will see you with the next video next time.